Chia Chibbit is a Volkit that belongs to the Sakumara bloodline. She, along with her two parents, are the lasting members of her house. No one knows what happened to the Sakumara of the past. It is believed that they had all fallen to the Onikin that invaded the land of the mortals shortly after the fall of Malakath. The Onikin were said to have breached the surface of the world from the underworld of where Malakath was kept imprisoned, believed to never be seen again. They had come without warning, and suddenly seizing every living creature they came across and stealing their lives away, feasting on the very flesh and souls of the mortals. Despite the attack of the Onikin that was unprovoked and without cause, the fiends seemed to have an agenda in mind. It appeared that they had been focused on one of Ain's trees of Magicka, located on Zuxin Island. The reasoning behind the fiend's attraction to the tree had been beyond the comprehension of Minkind at the time. However, some would believe that the Onikin were after the strong magical essence that the trees harbor to possibly gain in power. Because of this, guardians of the trees have been born and conditioned solely with protecting the trees in mind. The Sakumara bloodline had been known to be fierce protectors of the magical tree named Sakumara for generations. They were the first and only fighters to fend off the fiend's attack and died with honor doing their destined duty. There are only 3 lasting members of this proud bloodline of Alikhat Vulcan today, Chia included. And although the tree Sakumara still stands against the test of time and battle, Chia's destiny was not aligned with protecting the tree, like with her family. She had been called elsewhere, despite Chia's disagreement against the change in her path, but because she had been called to do so, she could not argue nor refuse her calling. Ever since Chia was a young girl, she had been taught in the ways of fighting the evils of the world, especially those of Ilkin, known as the Onikin. She had been taught the magical teachings of white magicka and how to incorporate it into her fighting techniques, which involved the use of a thin sword made of steel. These swords were not of the traditional kind, whereas they would be thick and made of metal, strong enough to cut through hard material, but rather finely made to cut through flesh with precision and accuracy. They were not like cleavers or long, broad swords, but thin and light enough to be carried with ease and used with practiced discipline for maximum proficiency. Not only was she skilled in the art of the sword, but also practiced white magicka, but not in the traditional sense, whereas one would mend and heal the wounds of others, but rather with written words of the divine. These words of holy scriptures were taught to many of the young of Zuxin and practiced daily. These scriptures were often written on paper or scrolls and used to ward off evil. They would be hung on the walls of homes and even important locations such as temples of worship and shrines of the gods. They were made small and shortened in word length for easier consumption and would come to be called charms, so as not to be confused with the full scriptures of the gods. These charms were said to be powerful assets to ward off the evils of the hellish underworld and the corruption it carries, capable of banishing even the most powerful of Onikin when placed directly on the source of the evil. This method of fighting off the corruption and menace of evil had been only known to Zuxia before it would be later practiced throughout the world. This was due to the spreading teachings of Chia herself, for she had been known as the traveling worshipper that traveled around the world and fought against the onslaught of evil she came across, granting her the moniker name Chibbit, which meant small warrior in her homeland. Chia would grow into a prolific warrior of the light in her own right over the years of her young life. However, she would soon meet her match when she would one day come across a beastkin unlike any other she had ever met. This mysterious beastkin was not of ill kin, but rather something far more bizarre and strange than anything she had ever come across in her evil banishing career. He was a male Vulhund, a beastkin not known to many, but a formidable threat nonetheless, for it was believed that their kind were said to feed and prey on others, specifically the blood of other kin. Now, something like this had been unheard of by Chia herself, and as perplexing as it was, Chia had been tasked to take down the fiend who was said to have been a constant menace to some townsfolk he often preyed on, coining him as a serial killer in some cases. This serial killer was not like a typical murderer, where the victim would be slain and left for dead in the middle of the streets to be later found by others, but rather meticulous in his methods of killing. The chosen victims were said to have vanished completely, as if they had been taken in the night, never to be seen again, and having no evidence of there being a crime in the first place. Many speculations have been thrown to the workings of evil fiends of the supernatural, something that could easily escape the minds and logics of the mortals who could not explain what they did not, nor could not understand. Which brought the attention of Chia, who would take it upon herself to look into the matter, only to come up with the discovery that all was not as it would seem. Her experience with Onikin and evil would tell her that she had been dealing with something more mundane but equally unique, even for her. Thus would begin her investigations of the missing kin reported by those affected by this unknown threat. She began to see the cases as not that of supernatural fiends, but something far more foreign, which would implore all of her senses to be keen and sharp. That's when she started to notice the evidence of a predator. A predator that not only stalked his prey at night, but also had the hunger for their blood. She came to this conclusion by first investigating the areas of the attack, even if no body was to be found. There would be subtle traces of blood left behind, a telling sign of an attack, and although she was not familiar with the behavior of Volhund at the time, her experience with Ilkin would suggest that this particular being had a penchant for blood. The strange cases of the missing Fokin and the blood-sucking fiend would start to sound less like the work of Onikin and more like the dealings of an Elderlock, a race of blood-feasting fiends unlike any other race out, but would operate the same way as agents of corruption, something Chia had learned during her training. She would set on hunts that would have any and all hints of Elderlock activity and even slew the fiends as part of her regime of evil cleansing. However, who and what she encountered was not what she had expected nor was prepared for. Instead of some mongering, blood-sucking Elderlock, she found a weak and feeble-looking beastkin of unknown origin. He had reddish-orange hair and yellow eyes that regarded you with speculation and suspicion. Chia could tell that he too was a beastkin due to his wild demeanor and sharp, elongated fangs. But rather than greeting the lad as a threat, Chia felt remorse for him. Something behind his almond-shaped eyes spoke to Chia as someone who was in need of help. Someone who was as frightened of her as she was of him. He was in hiding. She found him huddled in a corner of a church she had suspected to be the den of an Elderlock, as reported by the nearby townsfolk. He wore tethered leather clothing and bandages around his hands and bare feet, which looked worn and dirty from heavy use. He smelled of dirt and iron. The stench of old blood surrounded him. Whether the blood belonged to him or not was not known to Chia, but there was no doubt he had a run-in with someone or something that left him in the sorry state she encountered that day. Rather than treat him as the fiend he was to be seen as, she felt pity for him. She did not know what he was nor where he came from, but she felt that she had to help him in some way, as it was her duty to lend aid to the weak and unable, him included, even if he was to be seen as the monster he surely was to be. And he was indeed a monster, as confessed to her his crimes and dealings of killing others for the sake of his own survival. Whether or not his confession to her was a plea for mercy, or a plight to save his own skin, or a genuine act of remorse for what he had done, Chia would not judge him, for it was not her place to do so. She would listen to him as he confided in her, and would even introduce himself to her. His name was Raz, and he was of Volhund blood. He said that he used to belong to a band of bandits before they would disown him and leave him for dead on his own. To survive as a Volhund, he had to feed on the blood of others to keep himself alive, but would state that he never meant to kill anyone, just to slake his hunger. Whether this was another lie to save himself, Chia would never know, but she would listen to him regardless and take his word for it, on the condition that he turn himself into the law for the crimes he had committed on behalf of Minkind. Chia would never see Raz again after he had promised to do as she asked of him, and she was left to continue her journey of teaching others and helping quell the evil of the land as a slayer of evil and warrior of the light.